I'm Captain Cassidy Wynn, United States Air Force, and I'm about to tell you how my own blood sister tried to destroy my 12-year military career by forging psychiatric documents and stealing our father's entire inheritance while I was deployed in a combat zone. She thought I was just another naive soldier who followed orders blindly and trusted family unconditionally. What she didn't know was that I'd learned psychological warfare from the best instructors in the military, and I was about to give her a masterclass in tactical revenge that would end her criminal enterprise forever. The betrayal started when Dad died, but it ended when I proved that some family members are more dangerous than enemy combatants, and sometimes the most important mission is protecting yourself from the people who share your DNA. Colonel James Wynn, my father, died of a heart attack at 03:47 hours on March 15th, while I was running night operations at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, leading a C-130 cargo mission into Afghanistan. The Red Cross notification came through my commanding officer during mission briefing. Father deceased, emergency leave approved immediately, report to transportation for priority airlift to CONUS. 26 hours later, I was stepping off a military transport at Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado Springs, expecting to grieve with my sister Lauren and handle Dad's final military honors like any service family should. Instead, I walked straight into the most sophisticated family destruction operation I'd ever encountered, orchestrated by someone who had been planning my downfall for years while I was overseas protecting American interests. Lauren Wynn had always been the family failure, but I never realized she blamed me for her complete inability to build anything meaningful with her life. While I was earning my commission at the Air Force Academy and learning to fly multi-million-dollar aircraft, she was dropping out of community college for the third time and burning through Dad's retirement savings with ridiculous business schemes that never materialized. While I was leading airmen in combat deployments and earning Bronze Stars for exceptional performance under fire, she was living in Dad's basement at age 33, pretending to care for him while systematically stealing his credit cards and forging his signature on loan applications. The resentment had been festering like an infected wound for over a decade, and she'd finally found the perfect opportunity to destroy everything I'd worked for while stealing every penny Dad had saved during his 30-year military career. The funeral was Lauren's first major performance in what I now recognize as a carefully orchestrated psychological operation designed to eliminate me from the family entirely. She played the devoted daughter role flawlessly, wearing expensive black designer clothes that probably paid for, delivering tearful eulogies about his service and sacrifice, and accepting condolences from our extended military family like she'd been his primary caregiver instead of his financial parasite. She had prepared photo displays showing her with Dad at recent family events I'd missed because I was deployed overseas, and she made sure everyone understood that she'd been taking care of everything while I was playing soldier in foreign countries. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment of that funeral was designed to establish her as the responsible family member while portraying me as the absent daughter who cared more about military glory than family obligations. The first hint of Lauren's true agenda came during the reception when she pulled me aside for what she called a private family discussion about Dad's declining mental state before his death. According to Lauren, Dad had been exhibiting signs of dementia and confusion, making irrational financial decisions, and expressing paranoid concerns about my military service and psychological stability. She claimed he'd been worried about my combat trauma and had mentioned several times that he didn't think I was mentally capable of handling major financial responsibilities or making sound personal decisions. The conversation felt wrong immediately. Dad had always been proud of my military service and had never expressed any concerns about my mental health or professional confidence during our regular video calls from overseas. Lauren's manipulation became more obvious when she started sharing examples of Dad's alleged concerns about my psychological state. She claimed he'd been keeping newspaper clippings about military suicides and PTSD-related incidents, saying he was worried I might snap like other combat veterans who couldn't handle the transition back to civilian life. According to her fabricated narrative, Dad had been consulting with medical professionals about getting help for my supposed mental health issues, and he'd been considering various legal options to protect me from myself when it came to financial planning and inheritance matters. Every word she spoke was designed to plant seeds of doubt about my competence while establishing her as the concerned family member who was trying to protect everyone from my alleged psychological instability. The ambush came 3 days after we buried Dad, when the family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, called both of us to his office for what I assumed would be a routine reading of Dad's will and discussion of standard estate planning matters. I expected the usual military family arrangements: equal division of assets, special provisions for Dad's medals and military memorabilia, maybe some charitable donations to veteran organizations he'd supported throughout his retirement. Instead, Henderson dropped a legal nuclear bomb that devastated everything I thought I knew about my father's final wishes and my standing as his daughter. According to the documentation spread across his conference table, Dad had declared me mentally incompetent due to severe PTSD and debilitating combat-related psychological disorders that made me completely unfit to handle financial responsibilities, make rational decisions, or maintain stable relationships with family members. The psychiatric documentation looked absolutely legitimate. Detailed psychological evaluations spanning 8 months, comprehensive reports from licensed psychiatrists describing symptoms I'd never experienced, clinical assessments documenting violent outbursts and erratic behavior that had never occurred, and Dad's notarized signature on legal documents declaring me psychologically unfit for any inheritance or family financial responsibilities. According to these fabricated reports, my military deployments had left me dangerously unstable, prone to explosive rage, completely unable to manage money responsibly, and suffering from paranoid delusions about family members trying to harm me. Lauren sat across from me in that conference room, dabbing her eyes with tissues and expressing shock at the severity of my alleged mental health problems, while Henderson explained that she would inherit Dad's entire $2.3 million estate, including his property, investments, life insurance, and complete control over his military survivor benefits. I maintained perfect military bearing throughout that devastating meeting, even as my entire world collapsed like a controlled demolition around me. "Sir, I've never been evaluated by these psychiatrists," I told Henderson, with the same calm professionalism I'd used during combat operations. "My security clearance requires annual psychological screening through military medical channels, and I've never had any mental health issues documented in my official service record." But Lauren had anticipated that objection and was ready with even more damaging evidence. She'd somehow obtained copies of classified after-action reports from my Afghanistan deployments, highlighting every firefight, every IED explosion, every casualty evacuation I'd participated in, spinning them into a narrative of accumulated trauma that supposedly drove me to complete psychological breakdown. Lauren's preparation for this ambush was more thorough than any military operation I'd ever planned. She'd researched my deployment history, obtained copies of incident reports that should have been classified, and even interviewed other military families about common PTSD symptoms to make her fabricated evidence more convincing. She told Henderson that I'd been sending increasingly erratic text messages from overseas, making paranoid accusations about family members, and expressing violent fantasies about people who had supposedly wronged me. Every piece of evidence she presented was either completely fabricated or taken so far out of context that it painted me as a dangerous, unstable individual who posed a threat to everyone around me. The most devastating part of Lauren's psychological warfare campaign was how she'd manipulated Dad during his final months when he was most vulnerable to her influence. She'd been living in his house, controlling his medications, monitoring his phone calls, and gradually isolating him from other family members and friends who might have questioned her version of events. She'd convinced him that my overseas service was making me increasingly unstable, that I was sending threatening messages to family members, and expressing violent fantasies about people who had supposedly wronged me. Dad's signature on those psychiatric evaluation authorizations wasn't forged. She'd actually convinced him to sign documents that he thought were getting me the mental health support I supposedly needed. The flight back to my duty station became the turning point. that would ultimately destroy Lauren's entire criminal enterprise. She'd booked herself on the same commercial flight, American Airlines Flight 1247 from Colorado Springs to Qatar with connections, claiming she needed to monitor my behavior and ensure I didn't have a psychological breakdown during travel. She actually approached the flight crew before boarding to inform them that I was a potentially unstable military person who might become violent or agitated during the flight, requesting that the keeper informed of any concerning behavior I might exhibit. For the first 2 hours of that flight, I sat in silence processing the magnitude of her betrayal while she continued her performance as the concerned sister, protecting everyone from her dangerous military sibling. At 35,000 feet over Kansas, our Boeing 737-800 encountered severe turbulence that had the entire aircraft shaking like a Humvee under mortar fire. Passengers were screaming, oxygen masks deployed automatically, and the aircraft began an uncontrolled descent that had everyone preparing for the worst possible outcome. That's when the flight attendant's voice cut through the chaos, calling for any medical personnel or anyone with aviation experience to identify themselves immediately. The captain had suffered what appeared to be a massive heart attack. The first officer was struggling with multiple system failures, and we had 298 souls on board, including crew members who were counting on someone with emergency training to step forward and help save their lives. I unbuckled my seatbelt and moved toward the cockpit with the same calm focus I'd learned during countless emergency training scenarios. I'm Captain Cassidy Wynn, United States Air Force, qualified pilot on C-130 Hercules, KC-135 Stratotanker, and current on civilian aircraft emergency procedures. I announced to the terrified flight crew, who were barely maintaining control of a rapidly deteriorating situation. The first officer, pale with terror and fighting multiple system warnings, quickly briefed me on our status. Captain unconscious and unresponsive, hydraulic system compromised, multiple engine warnings, loss of cabin pressure, and we were losing altitude at 2,200 feet per minute, with Kansas City International Airport still 45 minutes away under normal circumstances. Lauren's voice immediately cut through the cabin chaos like enemy fire. Don't let her fly this plane. She's psychologically unstable. She's having a mental breakdown. She'll kill everyone on board. But the first officer and I were already running emergency checklists, coordinating with air traffic control, and executing the life-saving procedures that would either get everyone safely on the ground or result in a catastrophic crash that would kill every person on that aircraft. I switched to military communication protocols, my voice steady and professional as I declared a Mayday emergency and requested immediate priority landing clearance at the nearest suitable airport with emergency response capabilities standing by. The approach into Kansas City International Airport was the most challenging flying I'd ever attempted, fighting damaged hydraulic controls, crosswinds gusting to 35 knots, and system failures that would have challenged even the most experienced airline captains. I kept the aircraft attitude precisely controlled, managed power settings manually when automation failed, compensated for control surface damage, and executed a landing that was so smooth, passengers didn't realize how close we'd come to disaster until emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft and paramedics rushed aboard. The relief in that cabin was palpable as passengers realized they were safely on the ground, and several people actually applauded what the local news would later describe as a miraculous emergency landing that saved 298 lives. But Lauren wasn't finished with her campaign to destroy my reputation and career. While I was providing detailed statements to FAA investigators, airline safety officials, and emergency response coordinators about the technical aspects of the emergency landing, she was already working her manipulation tactics on reporters, passengers, and anyone else who would listen to her poisonous narrative. She told local media that I'd somehow caused the emergency through reckless behavior, that my combat trauma made me unpredictable and dangerous in crisis situations, and that she was terrified about my increasingly erratic behavior that had culminated in this aviation incident. The woman whose life I just saved was actively trying to convince everyone that I was a threat to public safety and aviation security. The media coverage that followed created a perfect storm of conflicting narratives that forced serious investigation into both the aviation emergency and the family dynamics behind Lauren's accusations. Major news networks picked up the story of the Air Force captain who executed a heroic emergency landing that saved nearly 300 lives, but Lauren's poisonous version was spreading through social media and gossip channels just as rapidly. She appeared on local television shows, expressing deep concern about my mental state, while airline officials and FAA investigators were praising my professional competence and life-saving actions during an unprecedented emergency. That media attention became Lauren's biggest tactical error because it forced her fabricated evidence into the harsh light of official investigation, where her forged documents and false accusations couldn't survive serious scrutiny. Military security clearance investigators don't accept psychiatric reports at face value, and FAA officials needed to verify every aspect of my qualifications before determining whether any violations of aviation safety regulations had occurred. Within 72 hours, investigators had discovered that the psychiatric evaluations used to steal my inheritance were completely fraudulent, created by a document mill operation that Lauren had paid $18,000 to produce fake medical records with forged signatures from licensed psychiatrists who had never met me. The criminal investigation expanded rapidly once federal agents started pulling threads from Lauren's elaborate web of fraud and family manipulation. The doctors who had allegedly evaluated my mental health were either completely fictional personas or real psychiatrists whose professional licenses had been stolen for identity fraud purposes. The dates on Lauren's fabricated psychiatric evaluations coincided exactly with periods when I was deployed and classified overseas locations, making it physically impossible for me to have attended the appointments described in her forged documentation. She'd gotten careless with details, probably assuming that no one would ever investigate her claims thoroughly enough to expose the systematic fraud she had been perpetrating against our family for years. Dad's original will surfaced during the federal investigation when FBI agents executed search warrants on Henderson's law office and discovered that Lauren had systematically replaced authentic legal documents with her fabricated versions. The legitimate will split Dad's estate equally between Lauren and me, included no mentions of psychological incompetence or mental health concerns, and actually contained a handwritten note expressing pride in my military service and confidence in my ability to handle financial responsibilities. Lauren had intercepted Dad's real estate planning documents after his death, substituted her fraudulent versions, and bribed Henderson's paralegal to replace the authentic files with her forged documentation before the official reading. The scope of Lauren's criminal enterprise became clear when investigators discovered she'd been systematically stealing from Dad for over 3 years while manipulating him into believing I was becoming psychologically unstable and potentially dangerous. Bank records showed regular, unauthorized transfers from his accounts to shell companies she'd created, forged signatures on investment withdrawals, fraudulent use of his military benefits for personal expenses, and systematic theft of his Social Security and pension payments. The psychological warfare campaign against me was just the final phase of a long-term financial operation that had been draining Dad's retirement savings while convincing him that his military daughter was becoming a threat to family safety and security. Military justice moved with surgical precision when my security clearance investigation revealed the full extent of Lauren's attempts to sabotage my career through false allegations about my psychological fitness for duty. The Department of Defense takes any threats against military personnel seriously, especially when those threats involve classified access and national security clearances. Lauren's documented attempts to portray me as mentally unstable constituted a deliberate attack on a serving officer's fitness for duty, which falls under federal jurisdiction when it involves military readiness, classified information, and potential threats to operational security. The federal grand jury indictment against Lauren included charges of wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to defraud military benefits, obstruction of justice, and aggravated identity theft related to her use of forged medical licenses. Each count carried substantial prison time, and the prosecutor made it clear that Lauren's systematic targeting of a deployed military service member represented an especially serious threat to national security and military family welfare. The same manipulation tactics she'd used against Dad and me had also been employed against other elderly military retirees in our community, making her a serial predator who specifically targeted veteran families. The media narrative shifted completely once Lauren's arrest became public knowledge, and the full scope of her criminal enterprise was revealed through court documents. The same reporters who had interviewed her about her concerns regarding my mental health were now covering her federal indictment on multiple felony charges related to systematic fraud against military families. The passengers whose lives I saved came forward to provide character testimony, describing my professionalism and competence during the aviation emergency, while investigators revealed that Lauren had been running confidence schemes against vulnerable people for years. Lauren's psychological profile emerged during the criminal trial, revealing a textbook sociopath who had been manipulating and exploiting everyone around her since adolescence. Former employers testified about missing money and altered financial records. Ex-boyfriends described emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. Family friends recalled suspicious behavior around elderly relatives. And mental health experts explained how she'd systematically targeted Dad's vulnerabilities during his final illness. The woman who had tried to portray me as psychologically dangerous was herself a documented predator who had been destroying lives for personal gain throughout her entire adult life. The federal sentencing hearing was held at the United States District Court in Colorado Springs, with Lauren facing up to 35 years in federal prison for the combined charges and enhanced penalties related to targeting military families. I attended in my dress blue uniform, representing not just myself, but every service member who had been victimized by family predators seeking to exploit military benefits and steal earned inheritance. When Judge Morrison asked if I had a victim impact statement, I kept it precise and military professional. Your Honor, the defendant's actions constituted a systematic attack on military service, family honor, and national security. Justice served here protects other military families from similar predatory operations. Lauren received 18 years in federal prison with full restitution requirements that included interest, penalties, and additional damages that nearly tripled the amount she owed to Dad's estate and other victims. Judge Morrison specifically noted that her targeting of deployed military personnel and systematic fraud against veteran families represented a threat to national security that warranted maximum sentencing under federal guidelines. As federal marshals led her away in handcuffs and prison transport chains, she finally dropped her victim performance and screamed obscenities that revealed the true sociopathic personality she'd been hiding behind manipulation and fake cures for decades. The inheritance recovery process took 14 months to complete, but Dad's legitimate will was ultimately probated, with my full share restored and additional damages awarded for Lauren's systematic theft and fraud. The $1.15 million I inherited came with interest and penalties that Lauren's criminal restitution couldn't cover, leaving her responsible for debt payments that would continue throughout her prison sentence and years beyond her eventual release. But financial recovery wasn't the real victory. Clearing my name and exposing her criminal enterprise protected other potential victims from falling into similar traps while vindicating Dad's actual wishes and military legacy. My security clearance was not only maintained, but actually upgraded to top secret SCI after the investigation confirmed my integrity and professional competence throughout the entire ordeal. The Air Force commended my actions during the commercial aviation emergency and incorporated the incident into pilot training programs as an example of exceptional performance under extreme pressure. The same psychological resilience that Lauren tried to weaponize against me became evidence of exactly the kind of leadership quality the military values in its officers during crisis situations. The commercial aviation emergency opened doors throughout the airline industry that Lauren could never have imagined when she first began planning my destruction. 3 major carriers offered me command pilot positions, aviation safety organizations invited me to speak at international conferences, and pilot training programs requested my input on emergency procedures and crisis management protocols. The incident that Lauren hoped would end my flying career actually elevated my professional reputation and created opportunities that expanded far beyond military service into civilian aviation leadership. But the most satisfying element of my complete victory over Lauren's criminal enterprise wasn't personal recognition or financial recovery. It was the positive impact I could create using the resources she'd tried to steal for her own parasitic lifestyle. Using my inheritance as foundation funding, I established the Colonel James Wynn Institute for Women in Aviation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to training female pilots and supporting women pursuing careers in military and commercial aviation. The institute provides full scholarships, professional mentorship programs, and advanced flight training that creates real opportunities for the next generation of female aviators who will carry forward Dad's legacy of military service and professional excellence. The Institute's success exceeded every projection during our first operational year. 36 women earned their commercial pilot licenses and advanced certifications. 12 joined military services across all branches, 14 were hired by major airlines, and 10 started careers in corporate aviation or specialized flight instruction. Every graduate carries forward the lesson that family honor is earned through service and sacrifice, not inherited through blood relationships or stolen through criminal fraud. Lauren's attempt to destroy our family's military legacy had the opposite effect of strengthening our positive impact on others while creating lasting institutions that will benefit women in aviation for generations. Lauren's criminal conviction became a landmark case cited in federal law enforcement training, legal education programs, and military family protection initiatives. Her mugshot and case details appear in FBI materials about white-collar crime targeting military families, and her prosecution led to enhanced legal protections for deployed service members facing family exploitation. The reputation she tried so desperately to destroy for me became permanently attached to her own identity as a convicted federal felon who targeted military families for systematic financial exploitation. Prison records show Lauren has been disciplinary problems throughout her incarceration, written up repeatedly for manipulation attempts against other inmates, aggressive behavior toward correctional staff, and violations of facility regulations. The same psychological patterns that drove her to steal from family and forge documents continue to manifest in an environment where her manipulation tactics are ineffective and often result in additional punishment. She's exactly where she belongs, surrounded by other convicted criminals who see through her sociopathic behavior patterns just as clearly as investigators eventually did. The final insult came during Lauren's 4th year of federal incarceration, when she attempted to file appeals claiming that her conviction was unjust and that she'd been protecting the family from my alleged psychological instability. Federal appellate courts rejected every motion, noting that her own recorded statements and documented behavior patterns contradicted any claims of good intentions or family protection. The woman who had spent years portraying me as mentally unstable was now making increasingly desperate legal arguments that revealed her own complete disconnection from reality and continued refusal to accept responsibility for her criminal actions. My promotion to lieutenant colonel came ahead of schedule, accompanied by assignment to the Pentagon, where I now work on aviation safety policies and military family protection initiatives. The psychological resilience that Lauren tried to portray as mental instability was recognized as exactly the kind of leadership quality the Air Force needs in senior officers who face complex challenges and family pressures. Her systematic attempt to destroy my military career actually accelerated my advancement through demonstration of character under the most extreme family betrayal imaginable. The Colonel James Wynn Institute has expanded operations to cover 12 states, with over 150 female graduates now flying for military services, commercial airlines, and specialized aviation companies. Our scholarship recipients consistently outperform industry standards in flight training, safety records, and professional advancement. Dad's legacy lives on through every woman who earns her wings through Institute programs, while Lauren's name remains permanently associated with federal criminal conviction and systematic fraud against military families. Today, when junior officers ask me about handling family problems that might affect their military careers, I tell them Lauren's complete story as both a warning and an example of how military training and values can overcome even the most sophisticated family betrayal. Trust must be earned through consistent behavior over time, and military families face unique vulnerabilities that predators often try to exploit. Stay alert, verify everything, document suspicious behavior, and never assume that blood relationships guarantee loyalty or integrity when military benefits and inheritance are involved. Looking back on this entire experience, I realize Lauren actually did me an enormous favor by forcing me to prove my integrity under the most intense public scrutiny imaginable. Military careers often face challenges that test character and professional competence, but family betrayal creates a special category of adversity that reveals true strength and exposes fake loyalty from real commitment. Every female aviator who graduates from our institute carries forward the lesson that service and sacrifice create lasting value, while criminal fraud and family exploitation ultimately destroy everyone involved in such schemes. The next time someone asks whether military families are immune to the kind of predatory behavior that affects civilian families, I share Lauren's case as proof that uniform and service don't automatically protect against manipulation, theft, and systematic exploitation by family members. Military benefits, security clearances, and inheritance make service members particularly attractive targets for people who see opportunity in deployment cycles, family separation, and the complex legal arrangements that govern military life. Have you ever been systematically betrayed by a family member who tried to steal your military benefits while destroying your career through false accusations? What would you do if your own sister spent years manipulating your father into believing you were psychologically dangerous while stealing his entire life savings? Tell me in the comments about your experiences with family exploitation. I respond to every story from fellow service members who understand that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the people who share your last name and know exactly how to attack your military career and family honor.